Hey folks, tonight we're going to dive straight into something we never thought we'd have to say again, but here we are. Donald Trump is president. Again, I know, that's a rough way to start your night. Believe me, I'm not thrilled either. And yes, somehow it's been less than a month since his second inauguration, but it already feels like we've been trapped in this new timeline for decades. Let's just take a quick glance at what's gone down over the past few weeks. Shall we? Trump's been on a spree. Pardoning January 6th. Rioters pulling the U.S. out of the Paris Accords and the World Health Organization, again announcing a bizarre plan to take over Gaza and issuing executive orders trying to cancel birthright citizenship. Oh, and he's blamed a fatal plane crash on DEI programs and renamed the Gulf of Mexico to brace yourself the Gulf of America, and that's just Monday. He also responded to massive fires in LA County, not by sending help, but by releasing billions of gallons of water to the Central Valley 150 miles away from where the fires actually were. Then, he replaced a decorated four-star general with a Fox and Friends host as Secretary of Defense, slapped 25% tariffs on both Canada and Mexico. And unsurprisingly, Canadians had some feelings about it. At a hockey game, they booed the U.S. national anthem. But in true Canadian form, they still waited politely for the appropriate moment before doing it. Polite rebellion. That's the Canadian way. So why the sudden tariff tantrum toward Canada? Trump claimed it was because they weren't doing enough to stop fentanyl from entering the U.S., despite the fact that just 43 pounds were seized at the Canadian border last year, making up a minuscule fraction of all U.S. fentanyl seizures. But as always, facts don't matter when you're trying to look tough. Eventually, Trump paused the tariffs, claiming he got concessions from Canada. But when a Republican congressman tried to parrot that on CNN, things got awkward. CNN's Caitlin Collins asked him what exactly was new about Canada's supposed commitment. He fumbled, stammered, and ultimately admitted that Trudeau had at most reiterated a promise he already made in December. So basically, Trump got Canada to resend an email. And in the process, he nuked goodwill between the U.S. and one of the nicest countries on the planet. Because, of course, he did. But tariffs and tantrums are only the surface-level noise. What's truly disturbing is the return of something that defined Trump's first-term act of cruelty. In just a few weeks, he's issued multiple executive orders targeting trans and gender non-conforming people. He's launched an aggressive attack on government DEI programs, diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. Because why not go after something designed to make the workplace more fair? One memo instructed federal agencies to cut all DEI positions within 60 days. Another said our country would now be based on merit again, which is a hell of a statement when you're standing in front of a portrait of your dad who handed you a real estate empire. And it hasn't stopped there. The government has been ordered to remove posters that promote equity and inclusion, even harmless ones that say all are welcome. It's petty. It's vindictive. It's on brand. And then there's the spectacle. ICE raids are back, and this time, Trump's border czar Tom Homan thought it'd be a great idea to take Dr. Phil, yes, Dr. Phil, on a ride-along through Chicago. Because if there's one thing ICE needed, it's a daytime TV therapist holding a boom mic in the backseat. But look, as much as this all seems chaotic, that chaos isn't accidental. It's strategy. Steve Bannon, remember him? Trump's former advisor and professional haunted pumpkin laid out their plan during the first administration. Flood the zone. Overwhelm the media. Hit until they can't keep up. Do 3 crazy things a day and hope they only focus on one. That way, you get everything else done under the radar. It's not sophisticated. It's not even subtle. But it works. And right now, Trump is using that same playbook again. Take Project 2025, the roadmap for Trump's second term. One of the main architects behind it is Russell Vought, who now runs the Office of Management and Budget. Here's what he said on the record about the civil service. We want the bureaucrats to be traumatically affected. We want them to wake up and not want to go to work. Seriously, that's a real quote. His goal is to make government employees so miserable that they just quit, so that agencies like the EPA can't function, so that rules protecting the environment, civil rights, and public health get buried under a mountain of dysfunction. This isn't just draining the swamp. It's salting the earth. And helping Vought carry out this plan, Elon Musk. Yeah, him. Trump brought him in to run what he's calling the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE. Yep, like the meme coin. Elon Musk, whose vibe is somewhere between a Bond villain and your friend's divorced uncle who just discovered ayahuasca, is now overseeing federal downsizing. How's that going? Well, one of the first things DOGE did was send federal workers a choice quit now and get paid through September, or stay and risk being fired. Totally normal stuff. Nothing unsettling about that at all. And if that wasn't enough, Musk installed a bunch of 20-something aides inside actual government offices, kids who were barely alive when Shrek came out ordering career public servants to pack up and leave. One worker described it as being evicted from her office by someone who turned it into his bedroom. And yes, he asked her to buy him a beer on the way out. But hey, our government is based on merit again. Like DOGE staffer Edward Korestein, also known on social media as Big Balls. Not kidding. He was previously fired from an internship for leaking sensitive info. He's now helping downsize federal agencies. Another Musk aide, Marco Illes, a 25-year-old, was given access to Treasury Department payment data, including bank info tax refunds and sensitive personal records. When asked about this access, a Treasury official confirmed yes, that data includes where you live, how much you made your banking details, everything. And this guy had access. The same guy who tweeted about the Jew World Order and mocked 9/11 victims. But don't worry, Musk says that not everything we say will be true, but we'll try to correct it. Comforting. So where were we? Oh, right. Elon Musk is now heading a government department called DOGE, and he's staffed it with meme lords and interns with questionable resumes, all with the mission to shrink the federal workforce like a bag of spinach left on the counter too long. One of these aides, again not kidding, goes by the online name Big Balls and was previously fired for leaking internal data. And another, Marco Illes, had access to the Treasury's Bureau of Fiscal Service database. That means your tax refunds, direct deposit info, maybe even your home address, all accessible by a 25-year-old who tweets about the Jew World Order. The response from the administration: a whole lot of, we're still figuring that out. Kristi Noem, Trump's new director of Homeland Security, when asked if Elon having access to all that data was safe, gave one of the most baffling non-answers we've heard in a while. She basically said, well, we can't trust the government anymore. Cool, Kristi. But you are the government now. That's like saying you don't trust the driver while you're behind the wheel steering the car off a cliff. Her logic sounded like she was one sentence away from declaring, I don't even know who's making the decisions around here anymore. Wait, is it me? We're barely a month into this administration, and already we're watching unelected kids boot career experts out of offices, change access credentials, and reportedly walk around headquarters as if they own the place. Which brings us to the most alarming example of what happens when you hand the reins of power to people whose main skill set is tweeting memes USAID. You might know USAID as the agency responsible for disaster relief and humanitarian aid around the world. Basically, the people who rush in when hurricanes destroy villages, or when pandemics need coordinated responses. Well, under the Trump-Musk axis of chaos, USAID has been gutted. We're talking about taking a global workforce of 14,000 people and slicing it down to less than 300. In Africa, a continent of over 1.4 billion people, only 12 USAID employees remain. 12. That's fewer people than it takes to run a Starbucks during a morning rush. You couldn't even fully staff a bowling alley with that number. And these 12 people are now apparently responsible for all development, aid, disease prevention, infrastructure, support, and humanitarian aid in an entire continent. These cuts aren't just budget reviews or spending pauses. They're wrecking balls. Workers have been pulled from overseas posts, and the USAID logo has literally been taped over at their DC headquarters. If it wasn't real life, you'd assume it was a bad episode of Veep. And just in case you thought this was a temporary thing, Elon Musk tweeted recently that USAID could fit in a hot tub. Yes, a hot tub. That's how he envisions one of the world's most crucial humanitarian agencies. So yeah, this is all happening fast. And recklessly. And it's going to hurt people. The public pushback has been strong. Some USAID programs have been granted waivers to continue, especially those involving HIV treatment and emergency food aid. But here's the problem. There's so much confusion and so little communication that many of these waivers don't even reach the field workers who need them. So, operations still shut down, even if technically they're allowed to continue. One USAID worker described the whole situation like this. It's like we're cutting off oxygen to people, then handing them straws and saying, that should be fine. Let's look at a specific example. In South Africa, a women's health clinic that focused on treating HIV and STDs had to close its doors because of the funding freeze. Journalists tried to speak to patients, being turned away. One woman, confused and visibly distressed, asked, "If they won't help me here, where do I go?" The staff had no answer. And the glass windows of the closed clinic still had a decal that read, "We value you." Ooh. If you're wondering how the administration is justifying all this, they're not really trying that hard. Trump's press secretary recently went on a tear about how USAID has wasted money on DEI musicals in Ireland, transgender operas in Colombia, and comic books in Peru, which sounds kind of cool, honestly. But also, most of those projects weren't even funded by USAID. They were funded by separate State Department cultural grants. So we're not just cutting aid, we're cutting aid based on disinformation. And speaking of misinformation, Elon himself tweeted out a fake e-news graphic claiming USAID was funding celebrity trips to Ukraine. That graphic was, of course, completely fabricated. But that didn't stop Trump from retweeting it or from boosting other lies like USAID spending $50 million on condoms in Gaza, which also didn't happen. Still, Republican congressmen started quoting it on national TV. And just like that, a fake meme became a talking point on Fox News. Look, we've said it before, and we'll say it again. None of this is about policy. It's about performance. These guys aren't building a better government. They're tearing things down for clout retweets and the illusion of action. Because if you're busy yelling about transgender comic books, maybe nobody notices that you just slashed global HIV programs or put teenage AIDS in charge of federal payroll systems. And let's be clear, this has consequences. We're not just talking about political disagreements or shifting priorities. We're talking about shutting down the flow of antiretroviral medications to prevent HIV transmission to newborns. We're talking about eliminating disease tracking programs that help prevent global outbreaks before they reach our shores. And sure, they claim it's just a 90-day pause while they review spending. But if you believe that I have a bridge to sell you, or maybe a USAID office to convert into a spirit Halloween. The truth is, these programs don't just snap back on when the pause ends. Trust is broken. Partners walk away. Infrastructure crumbles. And people die. Meanwhile, back in the U.S., the administration's defense is, we'll try not to make too many mistakes. Well, that's great. Except those mistakes are affecting millions of lives, and the people making them have no business holding that kind of power in the first place. Let's switch gears, because while Elon Musk is out here turning government offices into meme farms, Trump has been busy launching legal and constitutional grenades. One of his biggest moves this month, attempting to end birthright citizenship. Yep, that thing written directly into the Constitution. You might remember this from his first term. Trump has had a weird obsession with the 14th Amendment for years. Specifically, he wants to reinterpret the part that says all persons born or naturalized in the United States are citizens of the United States. He claims it doesn't apply to the children of undocumented immigrants. Legal scholars on both sides of the aisle, they disagree, because it's pretty clear if you're born here, you're a citizen. That's how it's worked for over 150 years. But Trump's never been a fan of clear. So he issued an executive order aimed at ending automatic citizenship for children born in the U.S. to undocumented parents. The legal challenges hit immediately. Civil rights groups sued. Constitutional experts called it illegal. Judges warned it could destabilize entire communities. But Trump doesn't care about the courts, not when he has the Supreme Court in his pocket, and the media distracted by Elon's antics. And what's his next step? According to sources inside the administration, he's considering expanding the order to deny citizenship to kids born to visa holders. That includes people here on student visas, work visas, even diplomats in some cases. So basically, Trump's trying to make citizenship a privilege granted by the White House, not a right protected by law. It's not just cruel, it's dangerous. Because once you start deciding who counts as American based on vibes and paperwork, the door opens for anyone to be excluded. And it's not just birthright citizenship under attack. It's naturalized citizenship too. Reports are surfacing that DHS is building a task force to review past naturalizations, looking for technical errors or omissions they can use to revoke someone's citizenship retroactively. Let's be clear. This is not normal. In America, becoming a citizen is supposed to be final. Permanent. A promise. Not something the government can snatch back because your translator made a typo in 1997. But under Trump 2.0, that permanence is being questioned, and people are scared. Immigration lawyers are flooded with calls from clients asking, can they really take my citizenship away? And the honest answer is under this administration, maybe. The idea here is chilling. Turn citizenship into something fragile, breakable, and conditional. Just like every other form of belonging under authoritarian rule. And what's the justification? The White House claims it's about national security and stopping abuse. But let's be honest, it's about control. It's about sending a message to every immigrant in America. You're only safe if we say you are. Meanwhile, Trump's also turning his attention inward toward the very machinery of democracy. You might have heard about the so-called federal employee strike, a loosely organized movement of civil servants refusing to carry out certain Trump directives they believe are unconstitutional or dangerous. Think about that. Career government workers, nonpartisan, often low-profile folks who've served under multiple administrations are now quietly resisting orders from the President of the United States. They're not waving signs or chaining themselves to fences. They're using the tools they have, slowing down paperwork, raising procedural objections, requesting reviews. They're trying to buy time, delay the damage, protect the people. And the administration is furious. Trump has started calling them the deep state saboteurs. Steve Bannon went on a podcast and said they should be purged. And Elon, he tweeted a meme suggesting they should be forced to drink Bud Light until they comply, because apparently that's the most severe punishment he can imagine. But here's the thing. These aren't radicals. These are EPA scientists, USDA analysts, public health coordinators. They're the people who keep the country running, and they're scared because they know what's coming next. Trump's team is working on Schedule F 2.0, a policy that would let him fire tens of thousands of civil servants and replace them with loyalists. You might remember Schedule F from the tail end of his first term. It was a plan to strip protections from federal employees and turn career jobs into political appointments. That plan was shut down under Biden. But Trump never forgot it. Now, with a full second term, he's reviving it. And this time, he's not being subtle. He's already removed the heads of the Office of Personnel Management and the Merit Systems Protection Board, basically the HR department of the government, and the people who oversee hiring fairness. Those agencies now report directly to the White House. And guess who's been floated as the new head of OPM? Ivanka Trump. That's right. The woman who once launched a fashion brand that sold champagne glasses shaped like stilettos may soon be in charge of hiring every federal employee in America. What could go wrong? We're watching the federal workforce being transformed into a patronage machine where jobs go to friends, family donors, and anyone willing to put MAGA above the Constitution. And the purge is already underway. One leaked memo instructed agency heads to compile lists of disloyal employees, people who posted negative tweets, who questioned policy decisions, or who once donated to a Democrat. Welcome to the new America, where expressing an opinion can get you fired from public service. And let's not forget, the courts are being stacked too. Trump has already nominated 2 new federal judges in his second term. Both are under 40. One used to work at Fox News. The other has never tried a case in court. Both are known less for their legal experience and more for their loyalty. This is the blueprint break, the systems that create checks and balances, then fill the wreckage with cronies and clout chasers. And all of it is dressed up in patriotism, wrapped in flags, broadcast on social media with hashtags like #RestoreOrder and America First Again. But it's not about America. It's about power, about reshaping the government into something that answers only to one man and maybe his daughter. Let's take a break from citizenship chaos and federal purges for a minute and talk about something else that's literally burning the planet. Because while Trump 2.0 is busy purging civil servants and handing out appointments like candy at a parade, the climate crisis hasn't exactly paused to accommodate his agenda. In fact, Los Angeles County just experienced the worst wildfire season in recorded history. Tens of thousands of homes scorched, millions displaced. And when people begged for federal assistance, what did Trump do? Well, he held a press conference where he announced that the real solution was to reroute billions of gallons of water from Northern California into the Central Valley for farming, not for firefighting, not for drinking, not for putting out literal infernos. Nope. This was about supporting the hardworking farmers and winning the water war. You'd think the president would prioritize fire suppression over an irrigation boost for almond growers, but here we are. And to make things worse, the diverted water didn't even make it to the right place on time. Environmental regulators say it's likely to cause downstream flooding in low-lying communities, many of which are already dealing with heat-related blackouts. Good job, government efficiency, SAR. Meanwhile, Trump has fully pulled us out of the Paris Climate Accords again, because why not redo all our mistakes from the first go-around? This time, he called it a woke scam to make America apologize for the weather. He also claimed during a rally in Texas that climate change is just wind being disrespectful. That got a standing ovation. And let's talk about his new Secretary of Energy, an oil executive from Oklahoma, who just last year testified before Congress that solar panels give off radiation that can make cows sterile. That's who's setting our national energy policy now. And their first order of business, rebranding natural gas as freedom gas. Again, you might remember this from the tail end of Trump's first term when his Department of Energy decided that natural gas didn't have enough patriotic pizzazz, so they renamed it Freedom Gas. They've brought it back with commercials. You haven't lived until you've seen a taxpayer-funded ad where an eagle lands on a pipeline while a narrator says America runs on freedom. And speaking of propaganda, the Environmental Protection Agency, once a respected scientific institution, has now become a meme page. Literally, their social media team, which has reportedly been cut down to 2 people, now posts graphics of oil rigs photoshopped to look like bald eagles with captions like, "Real energy doesn't come from rainbows." I wish I were making that up. Meanwhile, wildfire smoke is choking the West Coast. Hurricane season is ramping up in the southeast, and record floods have already displaced communities in Missouri and Kentucky. And yet federal emergency funds are being slashed in favor of what the White House is calling resilience-based self-reliance. What does that mean exactly? Well, according to Kristi Noem, our DHS secretary, it's time for Americans to learn how to handle disasters without crying for government help. Cool. Guess I'll go fight a wildfire with a garden hose and a positive attitude. But seriously, this is terrifying. Emergency response units are underfunded. FEMA's disaster response teams have been reduced to skeleton crews. States are being told they need to rely on each other and develop community plans. In other words, you're on your own. And that message is spreading across departments. At the Department of Housing and Urban Development, a leaked internal memo instructed field offices to deprioritize climate-related infrastructure requests, citing ideological neutrality as the reason. Translated: if your town wants to build flood defenses or heat-resistant shelters, good luck. You'll have better odds building a wall out of hopes and prayers. Meanwhile, Trump keeps insisting climate change isn't real, even as wildfires consume half the state of California and Texas declares a second emergency heat wave in 2 months. During a press conference, when asked directly about the fires, Trump replied, "What fires? California is just having a little barbecue. Maybe they should rake the forests like Finland." Classic. And let's not forget the Department of Interior, which has now fully reversed protections for endangered species habitats in Alaska, the Pacific Northwest, and parts of New Mexico. Why? To allow for more patriotic drilling. That's the actual phrase used in the press release, patriotic drilling, because nothing says, "I love my country," like digging up its last remaining ecosystems to power a generator running an LED sign that says Trump 2028. And here's where it gets worse. The administration has proposed removing the words climate change from all federal documentation. Seriously, an internal directive from the Office of Management and Budget asked departments to scrub all references to climate change from grant language project titles and internal memos. This includes agencies like NASA NOAA and the National Weather Service. If you're a scientist and you want to study rising sea levels, you now have to phrase it as coastal irregularities. If you're tracking record-breaking heat waves, the phrase temperature anomalies is allowed, but not climate patterns. It's Orwellian, it's absurd, and it's real. There's even talk of eliminating climate education programs in public schools that receive federal funding, because apparently teaching kids that greenhouse gases are bad now qualifies as ideological indoctrination. So, while the world burns literally, we're arguing about what words we're allowed to use to describe it. And don't think the international community hasn't noticed. Our allies are watching in disbelief as the U.S. turns its back on decades of environmental leadership. Countries like Germany, Canada, and Japan have issued joint statements urging the U.S. to reconsider its exit from key climate agreements. The response from the White House, a meme of a polar bear wearing sunglasses captioned, "We're cool." That was the actual official response posted from the EPA's verified account. Folks, we're not just dealing with denial. We're dealing with a government that's actively making fun of people trying to save the planet. And if that doesn't make your blood boil hotter than a heat dome over Phoenix, I don't know what will. So far, we've covered Elon Musk downsizing the government like he's cutting carbs, Trump's obsession with dismantling birthright citizenship, and the administration's full-on war against climate science. But now, let's talk about something that feels even more surreal, because it's not just the civil service and the environment that are under siege. It's the military. And before you say, "But Trump loves the military?" No. Trump loves tanks at parades. He loves fighter jets flying overhead while he waves. He loves camouflage as an aesthetic. But he does not love the military as an institution, especially not the parts of it that might challenge his authority. So when he re-entered office, he made it clear the Pentagon would be loyal, or it would be replaced. Let's start with the top. Trump fired the Secretary of Defense. Who'd he replace him with? Pete Hegseth. You might know him as the guy from Fox and Friends who once bragged on air about not washing his hands because germs aren't real. Yes, that Pete Hegseth. He's now overseeing the world's most powerful military. And it's not just Pete. Trump has purged dozens of senior military officials across the Joint Chiefs service branches and defense agencies, anyone he saw as disloyal during his first term, or who dared to speak out after January 6th. In their place, a patchwork of conservative pundits, retired officers with fringe YouTube channels, and in one case, a guy best known for running a tactical gear podcast called Trigger Therapy. I wish I were exaggerating. The Department of Defense now feels less like a chain of command and more like a Discord server, moderated by conspiracy theorists. And the implications are massive. Let's talk about Operation Vibe Check. That's the internal nickname some staffers are using for the administration's new loyalty screening system for active duty troops. Soldiers are being evaluated not just on their fitness or discipline, but on their political leanings. Troops with suspicious online activity, like following certain journalists or even liking a tweet that criticizes Trump, are getting flagged. There are even reports of units being pulled from overseas rotation lists for failing what superiors called cultural compatibility tests. One Army captain told a reporter, anonymously, that they were asked during a review if they believed Trump had won the 2020 election. When they responded, "I serve the Constitution," their deployment to Germany was canceled the next week. Even military academies aren't immune. The Air Force Academy just revised its honor code to remove language about defending truth. Because apparently, truth is too political now. And this gets darker. The Trump administration has pushed to centralize the National Guard under White House control, bypassing state governors. This plan floated during his first term, but rejected, is now being revived under the name Patriot Shield. If it passes, which it might given the new legal justifications being rushed through Trump-aligned courts, it would mean Trump could unilaterally deploy National Guard units to crack down on protests or restore order anywhere in the country without permission from state governments. Sound familiar? It's the kind of thing strongmen do when they feel a little too comfortable with their power. And it's already being tested. A leaked memo from the White House detailed plans to use the Guard for emergency domestic stability missions, code for deploying troops against American citizens under the guise of public safety. What kinds of emergencies? According to the memo, those could include mass dissent regarding federal policies, organized opposition to executive directives, civil unrest, linked to disinformation campaigns. In other words, protests. People showing up with signs. People doing what Americans are supposed to do when the government goes off the rails. And to enforce these directives, the administration is working on a new domestic surveillance tool called Eyes On. It's reportedly a DHS-run platform that uses AI to flag potential threats to domestic unity. Sounds good, right? Until you realize it monitors everything from text messages to live streams to encrypted chats. A source inside DHS, speaking to ProPublica, described the software as an algorithmic panic button for authoritarianism, and it's already being tested in several states, mostly under the radar, supposedly to track fentanyl networks. But insiders say the real goal is to monitor political dissent and feed that data straight into the hands of the people now running the Department of Defense. So let's recap. We've got a Secretary of Defense who once smashed a coffee mug on live TV to own the libs, a military screening system designed to weed out anyone who might not be MAGA enough, a plan to federalize the National Guard, an AI-driven surveillance program to track dissent, and all of it is being justified as restoring strength and defending tradition. But tradition doesn't look like this. Tradition is civilian control of the military, not cable news personalities barking orders at decorated generals. Tradition is honoring your oath to the Constitution, not using it as a doormat on your way to power. And the troops, the actual people in uniform. Many are scared. Privately, some are resigning. Others are going dark on social media. One senior officer, forced into early retirement after criticizing the administration, said this to a friend: "I spent 30 years serving my country. I never thought I'd be told I was unfit because I believe in facts." That's the battlefield we're on now. Truth itself is under fire, and the people defending it, they're being replaced. Now, let's talk about something that should terrify every American. Whether you're liberal, conservative, or somewhere in between, the systematic dismantling of the free press. Because alongside Trump's military shakeup and Elon's bureaucratic bonfire, there's a quieter, more insidious campaign underway. One that doesn't just discredit the media, it seeks to replace it entirely. Let's start with the obvious Trump TV. It launched 2 weeks after his second inauguration. 24-hour coverage, nationwide syndication. No commercials, just endless loops of patriotic news and real American values. The anchors' familiar faces. Some from OANN, a few from Newsmax, even some ex-Fox News hosts who had gone a bit too far, even for Rupert Murdoch. If you think that's a high bar, think again. And their star primetime host, Tucker Carlson, of course, fresh off his exile from Fox Tucker, now broadcasts nightly under a giant neon sign that reads, "Real America," standing in front of a screen that constantly flashes American flags and stock footage of bald eagles screeching. The content, a toxic mix of revisionist history, open conspiracy theories, and heavily edited footage from protest marches. Their journalists refer to mainstream outlets as fake media cartels, and every story begins with some version of what they don't want you to know. But here's the part that's actually dangerous. Trump TV isn't just for ratings. It's for control. The Trump administration has already signed federal agreements to air Trump TV in military bases, VA hospitals, and federal buildings. Think about that. Government buildings, your tax dollars are now broadcasting Trump's hand-picked propaganda 24/7. It's even been mandated as the default channel in public waiting rooms, at post offices, DMV branches, and TSA lines in airports. That's not just a media strategy. That's a regime strategy. And it doesn't stop with what you're shown. It's about what you're not allowed to see too. Because Trump has started weaponizing federal power against any media outlet that criticizes him. He's revived and expanded his infamous enemies of the people list. This time, not just for the press, but also for individual reporters. A leaked memo from the White House details a program called Clearview, operated out of the newly restructured Federal Communications Bureau, which, surprise, replaced the FCC, Clearview's job. Track flag and suppress hostile narratives online. That includes reporters who question Trump's policies, journalists who cite anonymous sources, anyone who uses the term authoritarian in proximity to the White House. One New York Times reporter had her phone and laptop seized at a D.C. airport. No warrant, no explanation, just a national security flag placed on her name in a government database. Another journalist, this one from Reuters, was fired from her job after the Treasury Department froze her bank account pending investigation. When she asked what she was being investigated for, the answer was unverified foreign collaboration. She'd tweeted critically about Trump's stance on NATO. That was her crime. Meanwhile, Trump has pushed to revoke credentials for nearly all White House press pool members, replacing them with independent journalists from Trump TV, a few influencers from Truth Social, and bloggers who openly promote QAnon conspiracies. During a recent press briefing, a reporter tried to ask about the administration's latest executive order targeting transgender healthcare access. She was removed by Secret Service. Silently, in full view of the cameras. No one said a word because everyone knew what would happen if they did. This climate of fear is metastasizing. Editors at major publications are being told to tone down their headlines. Local newsrooms are being bought out by shell corporations with links to Trump donors. Even NPR, long the gold standard of public media, is being starved out. Their federal funding was slashed to near zero. And right-wing PACs have launched ad campaigns, branding them as elitist parasites. The goal: silence. Not just dissent, but discussion. They want to make questioning Trump feel dangerous, risky, like something you do only if you're ready to lose your job, your bank account, or your right to fly without extra screening. And here's where it gets even darker. An internal DHS document leaked last week outlined what they're calling a narrative risk index. It's a scoring system used to rate individuals, journalists, influencers, even private citizens, based on the potential disruptiveness of their public commentary. If you cross a certain threshold, you're flagged. And once you're flagged, you get added to the stability watch list. What happens then? Travel delays, random IRS audits, suspended social media accounts, denied permits, frozen grant applications, increased scrutiny from local law enforcement. It's all technically legal, just coincidental, just algorithmic, but it's happening. And the worst part, there's no transparency, no appeals process, no clear way to know if you've been listed. You just notice things start going wrong, that your emails aren't being answered, your direct deposits are late, your apartment application is denied. It's a slow, suffocating censorship. Not the kind that kicks down your door, but the kind that quietly closes all the doors around you. This is what authoritarianism looks like in 2025. Not bootsteps in the street, not tanks in the square, but a subtle systemic erasure of dissent. One voice at a time. And Trump's supporters, they cheer it on because they believe the press is the enemy, because they've been told the media lied about January 6th, about the election, about everything, because they've been trained to see truth as an attack and silence as safety. If you've been keeping track, we've now got Elon Musk running a department named after a meme, the military purged of dissenters, and the press reduced to little more than a PR team with talking points approved by Tucker Carlson. So what's next? Well, buckle up, because this administration isn't just going after the government and the media. It's coming for culture itself. That's right. The newest front in Trump's second-term war is something they're calling the American Greatness Initiative. And no, it's not just a bumper sticker slogan this time. It's an actual department. The Department of American Greatness. Yes, that's the real name, is a newly formed agency that combines elements of the National Endowment for the Humanities, the Department of Education, and the Corporation for Public Broadcasting into one massive culture-shaping super agency. Their stated mission: to restore traditional American values and combat ideological decay. Their actual mission: erase anything that doesn't align with Trump's vision of patriotism and weaponize nostalgia to do it. The first order of business: canceling federal funding for all DEI diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. Every last one. From universities to hospitals to nonprofit art centers. Gone. Universities that refuse to comply with the new American Values Guidelines risk losing all federal funding, including Pell Grants and research budgets. That's billions of dollars on the chopping block. What do those guidelines say? They ban ideologically divisive curricula, gender fluidity, education, and anything described as cultural self-criticism. In one case, a university was flagged for having a class called Race and Democracy in American History. Another was warned over a queer film studies course that failed to represent traditional family values. It's not just education, it's arts too. Public television stations that air LGBTQ+ content during family viewing hours defunded. Museums with exhibits on Black Lives Matter or Indigenous activism stripped of grants. Even the Library of Congress has come under fire for hosting an event on the evolution of protest music. Instead, the Department of American Greatness is funding new projects with names like Heroes of the Heartland, Real Stories of Real Americans, Faith Flag and Family, A Return to the Basics, the Patriots Reading List, which includes no authors published after 1965 unless they've appeared on Fox News. And speaking of libraries, Trump's administration is now working to federally regulate public libraries under the guise of child protection. They want to require all federally funded libraries to use a national content filter system that blocks access to any book deemed age inappropriate or culturally hostile. That list, leaked in part to journalists, includes Beloved by Toni Morrison, Fun Home by Alison Bechdel, Stamped by Ibram X. Kendi, any edition of The Diary of Anne Frank with expanded commentary on systemic oppression. This is book banning on a national scale. And don't forget entertainment. Trump's allies in Congress are pushing for tax penalties on film studios that produce content hostile to American values. What does hostile mean? Well, if your lead character is LGBTQ, Muslim, or a woman who doesn't become a mother, by the third act, you're on thin ice. One GOP senator even proposed a Hollywood accountability tax for studios that receive federal filming subsidies while producing woke propaganda. And it's working. Studios are self-censoring. Network writers' rooms are being gutted. Independent filmmakers are being denied permits unless they submit scripts for cultural review. And what's filling the gap? Trump TV produced dramas. Yep, the Department of American Greatness is now partnering with Trump TV to produce a slate of values-forward entertainment, including a family sitcom about a retired coal miner who solves crimes using Bible verses, a reality dating show called Faith First, where contestants compete to marry a pastor's daughter, a historical drama rewriting the Civil War to focus on Northern aggression and spiritual redemption. These shows are funded with your tax dollars, and they're being promoted in schools. Literally, teachers are being encouraged to use these programs as civics enrichment content. Students are being asked to write essays on how their families reflect American greatness. One district even gave extra credit to kids who wrote letters to Trump. But here's where it gets even more dystopian. The Department of Education has launched something called the Loyalty Literacy Initiative. It's a curriculum module for K-12 students that emphasizes patriotic comprehension. Lesson plans include analyzing Trump's speeches as texts of resilience, rewriting the Pledge of Allegiance to include personalized commitments to the country. And this is real memorizing quotes from Donald Trump and writing reflections on their meaning. In some districts, this module is now mandatory. A teacher in Arizona who wished to remain anonymous said she was told that failure to teach the new curriculum could be interpreted as undermining national unity. She's already received a formal warning after letting students read an excerpt from the 1619 Project. And what about teachers who resist? There's now a hotline. Yep. The Department of American Greatness has set up a National Patriot Tips line where parents can report teachers for un-American conduct. Already, over 12,000 reports have been filed. Most anonymous, some absurd. Many leading to investigations or disciplinary action. A high school history teacher in Ohio was suspended after a student recorded her criticizing the new DEI ban. She's still waiting for a hearing. And remember, this is all happening under a banner of freedom. That's the branding. That's the pitch. Trump says he's restoring free speech by removing forced speech, that he's liberating education from political correctness, that he's defending children from dangerous ideas. But the reality, they're burning books with bureaucratic language. They're whitewashing history with patriotic graphics. They're replacing culture with curated propaganda. And they're doing it with shocking speed because they know that if you control the stories a nation tells about itself, its people, its past, you control its future. We've now got a Trump-backed Department of American Greatness rewriting culture, history, and education like it's a group project in an authoritarian dystopia. But if you think that's where the control stops, think again. Because now we're entering the part of the second term that feels like it was ripped straight from a Black Mirror episode. Let's talk about surveillance and how in the span of just months, America has transformed from the land of the free into the land of the watched. It started quietly. A few executive orders here, a few funding reshuffles there. But now, in June of Trump's second year back in office, we're living in what some insiders are calling a soft rollout of a social credit system. That's right. America, the country that once mocked China's surveillance state, now has a version of its own. Only ours is cloaked in consumer protection, public safety, and of course, patriotism. Here's how it works. The Federal Identity Trust Program, or FITP, was pitched as a way to protect Americans from identity theft and foreign interference. Sounds reasonable, right? It started with encouraging citizens to enroll in a unified ID system, combining driver's license data, passport data, and federal tax records into one secure digital profile. Enrollment was optional at first. Then came the incentives, faster tax refunds, streamlined TSA access discounts on federal student loans, and early access to disaster relief aid. Now, it's no longer optional. As of last month, any American seeking federal benefits, Social Security, Medicare, federal student aid housing assistance must enroll in FITP. That alone is deeply concerning. But it's what FITP connects to that really raises alarms. Because your profile now links to your social media accounts, yes, even private ones, your mobile device location history, your online purchase records, your browsing behavior, your political donation history, your voting registration, all of it in one place. And that place is controlled by a new DHS sub-agency called the Office of Domestic Harmony. You can't make this up. Their mission, per their founding charter, is to promote social cohesion, detect destabilizing trends, and ensure the preservation of cultural unity. In practice, that means they're watching you closely. If you post something deemed culturally antagonistic, a term that now includes criticizing the president, challenging school book bans, or attending certain protests, you get flagged. At first, the consequences are subtle. Your TSA pre-check gets revoked. Your tax return is delayed. Your bank might ask for additional verification. But if the behavior continues, you may lose access to federal job listings. You might get passed over for government contracts. Your child's FAFSA application may get a random audit. No one knocks on your door. No one arrests you. But everything suddenly gets harder. And the kicker: there's no appeals process. No public record of your score. No way to know what you did wrong. Because officially, there is no score. This isn't China. It's not a social credit system. It's just a behavioral review protocol tied to national security. That's the language they use. But we know what this is. And it's not just digital. The Trump administration has vastly expanded public camera networks, citing rising crime as justification. Hundreds of small towns, especially in swing states, have received federal grants to install community safety grids, high-resolution camera systems equipped with facial recognition and motion tracking. These aren't just for catching shoplifters. They're for identifying protest attendees, for monitoring who goes in and out of mosques, for mapping the social webs of political activists. Some cameras are even being placed inside houses of worship under the pretext of preventing extremist activity. And the software behind all this, built by a private firm called True Sentinel, whose CEO once posted, "If you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear." Classic. But maybe you're thinking, this is terrifying, but at least my phone is mine. Well, let me introduce you to the Patriot Patch. It's a firmware update pushed automatically to devices running major U.S. carriers. It was supposed to enhance emergency alerts and enable real-time safety notifications. But cybersecurity researchers have discovered that the update also allows limited remote microphone activation, ostensibly for use during national emergencies. When asked what defines a national emergency, the Trump administration responded, "Any situation where coordinated civil discourse may be required." Read that again. Coordinated, civil, discourse. They're building a system that lets them listen to you when they decide your voice might disrupt harmony. And guess who signed the executive order making it possible? Elon Musk, as director of Doge. He called it an experimental interface between humans and the digital government experience. When asked if there were privacy concerns, he replied, "Only if you're being weird." This is where we are now. Your identity, your face, your voice, your behavior, all linked, all monitored, all judged by invisible systems you can't see, can't question, can't appeal. We used to call this surveillance capitalism, a private sector problem. Now it's surveillance patriotism, a government feature. And the worst part, they've made people want it. Tucker Carlson runs nightly segments praising the system as the price of safety. Trump TV has branded it Freedom Tech. Conservative influencers post about how their high trust index scores get them early access to national parks and fast-track passport renewals. And MAGA-branded ID cards, they're a status symbol now. People show them off on Truth Social like badges of honor, as if being fully monitored makes them more American. Meanwhile, civil liberties groups are screaming into the void. Lawsuits are being filed. But in a court system filled with Trump-appointed judges and delayed dockets, nothing moves. And if you say anything too loud, you're flagged, and your life begins to glitch. Not overnight, not with a bang, but with a whisper. We've walked through Elon Musk's digital chokehold on bureaucracy, Trump's blitzkrieg against citizenship and civil service, the scorched earth approach to climate, the military's ideological reshuffle, the death of press freedom, the weaponization of culture, and now surveillance. So total, it makes George Orwell look optimistic. But here's the thing. Even in all this darkness, there's something flickering at the edges. People are starting to resist. Not the way you might imagine. Not with mass rallies and big slogans because those are easy to stamp out now. The new resistance is quiet, decentralized, and adaptive. It started with the whispers inside federal agencies. Civil servants slipping out early, avoiding Musk's biometric punch-ins, forwarding documents to whistleblower hotlines from burner phones. Then came the teachers. In blue states, and some purple ones, educators are rewriting the loyalty literacy curriculum behind closed doors, teaching real civics under the guise of test prep, assigning banned books as independent projects, swapping patriotism for critical thinking. And in the military, some soldiers have begun wearing old dog tags on the inside of their uniforms, blank tags that once signified MIA comrades. Now, they're being used to signal a quiet allegiance to the Constitution over any one man. No one talks about it. They just notice the weight, the sound of metal, the quiet nods in the hallway. And among the press, an underground journalism collective has formed the Eighth Column, a group of exiled reporters, fact-checkers, and whistleblowers, publishing stories on an encrypted network that mirrors across servers in Iceland, Finland, and New Zealand. They don't use bylines. They don't do interviews. They drop proof-leaked memos, training videos from Patriot Shield drills code from the Patriot Patch firmware. And people are reading. Millions. Even Trump's government can't fully block it, because to do that, they'd have to kill the whole internet. And they won't, because Trump needs the internet to keep his version of reality spinning. It's a battle of truths now, a war between the story they're telling and the story that's trying to fight its way out. And into this fray, something new is rising. 2028, another election year, but it doesn't feel like any other. It feels radioactive, fragile, like one match could blow the whole place apart or light the fuse for something new. On one side, Trump has already announced he'll run again. There are no term limits, he claims, because his first term was stolen. And thanks to a newly reinterpreted clause in the Constitution passed through Congress in a rushed midnight vote, his legal team insists he's eligible. He's calling it the three-term revolution. Posters are already up. His slogan, always, forever, Trump. On the other side, the opposition is fractured. But there's a movement growing, not a party yet, not a candidate yet, but a signal. People are sharing a symbol, a blank rectangle. Pure white. No words, no party, no logo. It started showing up on fences, then shirts, then as profile pictures. No slogans, no hashtags. Just that white square, like a blank page waiting to be written. The government doesn't know how to handle it. They've tried calling it anarchist messaging, but it's not. It's a question, what comes next? And it's catching fire. You see it in the subways of New York, where musicians play protest songs with no lyrics, just chords anyone can pick up and play. You see it in small towns where libraries host quiet hours where people read banned books behind blackout curtains. You see it in California, where a coalition of rogue mayors has declared sanctuary cities not just for immigrants, but for truth. Their statement: we still believe in facts, and you feel it in the fear from above. Because Trump is nervous, he's launched a task force to investigate emerging abstract symbols of sedition. He's instructed truth social moderators to block accounts using the white square. And Elon has reportedly proposed an AI that can detect subtle acts of ideological noncompliance through gesture recognition in video footage. But they're behind because you can't cancel silence. You can't censor symbols that don't say anything yet say everything. And that's where this ends. Not with a call to arms, not with some Hollywood finale, but with a choice. What kind of country do we want to be? One that runs on loyalty tests and meme departments and freedom gas and invisible scoring systems, or one that remembers what the flag actually stands for not who waves it the hardest. Because make no mistake, this isn't a story about Trump. It's a story about us, about how far we'll let it go, about how loudly we're willing to whisper, about what we'll trade for comfort and what we'll risk for freedom. The clock is ticking. The next election is already being rigged. The courts are already stacked. The surveillance nets are already up. But people are watching, waiting, moving. And somewhere in the heart of all this noise, hope is still alive, quiet, steady, and very, very dangerous.